One day, my neighbor, Mr. Johnson, borrowed some money from me. Time passed, and despite several reminders, he didn't return the money. Finally, he promised to repay it on a specific day. When the day arrived, I went to his house to collect the debt. To my surprise, Mr. Johnson greeted me warmly and invited me in for tea. We chatted for a while, but he made no mention of the debt. After a while, I gently reminded him, "Mr. Johnson, I believe today is the day you promised to return the money." He looked at me, feigning surprise, and said, "Oh, my dear friend, I'm so sorry, but I seem to have forgotten. Let me make it up to you next week." I smiled and replied, "Of course, Mr. Johnson, but let's make sure we remember next week." The following week, I returned. This time, Mr. Johnson had a different excuse. Realizing he might never pay me back, I decided to teach him a lesson. I took a small notebook and asked, "Mr. Johnson, may I borrow your pen?" He handed it to me, and I wrote in my notebook, "Borrowed pen from Mr. Johnson to be returned next week." He looked puzzled and asked, "Why are you writing that down?" I replied with a grin, "Well, I wouldn't want to forget. Just like you seem to forget your debts." The message hit home, and Mr. Johnson laughed nervously. The next day he repaid the money in full, not wanting to be the subject of another clever note.